Gordie Howe is known as Mr. Hockey and played for the Detroit Red Wings for most of his career. Warning, my previous vlogs on Detroit have been incredibly upbeat, but looming in the background are some of the neighborhoods, and they are incredibly devastated, DELRAY being among the worst. So be ready for this. From Travels with Lobo, you are viewing Detroit, America's Great Comeback City, and Lonely Planet's #2 city destination in 2018. Detroit Vlog number 23. Thank you for having subscribed, but I want to remind you that in order to get notification of my new vlogs being published every Friday, you've got to click on that alert bell at least once. The Detroit River is part of the Great Lakes system. At this point, it connects Lake Erie with Lake St. Clair, and it's also an international border between Canada and the United States. Windsor has a population of about 330,000, and the most dominant features of its skyline are Caesars Windsor Casino and the hotel. It is one of 4 casinos in the Detroit Windsor area. This one's owned by the Ontario government, but operated by Caesars Enterprises of Las Vegas, and just to the west, the heart of downtown Windsor. Here is a view from Windsor to Detroit, a city that in 1950 had a population of 1.86 million people, now has a population of about 670, which is about double that of Windsor, come to think of it. But let's not forget that the greater Detroit area has a population of about 3.7 million, making it one of the larger cities in the United States. Now, right about here, there's something marvelous that lurks under the riverbed. It's called the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel. Incredibly enough, the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel was opened in 1930 at a cost of $23 million. President Herbert Hoover turned a golden key in Washington that rang bells in both Detroit and Windsor to mark the opening of the tunnel. And in the spirit of international cooperation, it's owned by the city of Windsor and Detroit. This is definitely the best way to cross from Windsor to Detroit or vice versa, because it's downtown to downtown. Because here in Detroit, as you can see, you end up at the GM Ren Center, right in the heart of Detroit. So is the replacement of the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel the great mega project that I'm going to be spotlighting in this vlog? Well, maybe it should be, but it's not. By the way, right there in the distance is the entrance of the railway tunnel that goes under the Detroit River to Windsor, Ontario, Canada. It was the Michigan Central Railway that built this tunnel in 1909 to 1910, right next to the Michigan Central Railway Station that was the subject of last week's amazing vlog. Is it the replacement of this tunnel that's the source of the mega project? Modern freight trains look like this with doubly stacked containers, calling for a huge tunnel. And no, that's not in the cards. Too expensive. Not needed, I suppose, since there are other routes to follow. Instead, we're led closer to the story by this pleasure craft that's heading downriver towards the Ambassador Bridge. And by the way, the railway tunnel would be just a little bit beyond where the pleasure craft is right now. And here is a great view with the evening sun coming in from the west of the bridge and downtown. And the GM Ren Center right there where the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel comes in. And if you swing across the river, just a little south. Yes, at this point, Canada is south of the United States. It's incredible. But yes, there's Windsor. Maybe the nicest view. The privately owned Ambassador Bridge was completed in 1929. At the time, the longest suspended central span bridge in the world. It is a 4-lane bridge that carries more than 10,000 commercial vehicles on a typical weekday. Think about that, 10,000 on a typical weekday. That's its maximum capacity. The Ambassador Bridge is the busiest international border crossing in North America. 25% of trade volume between the two countries crosses this toll bridge. A recent study showed that 150,000 jobs in the region and $13 billion US in annual production depend on this international border crossing. So it was not surprising that on June 15, 2012, an agreement was reached between the state of Michigan and the government of Canada to construct a new bridge to be called the Gordie Howe Bridge, to be located about a kilometer southwest of the Ambassador Bridge. Now, Gordie Howe is known as Mr. Hockey and played for the Detroit Red Wings for most of his career. When you go to the new Little Caesars Arena where the Red Wings play now, you'll find this statue to Gordie Howe, number 9, the greatest Red Wing of all. So when you look at this panel, it attests to the greatness of Gordie Howe. You can see that he scored 801 goals. That was surpassed only by Wayne Gretzky, who scored 894. So I suppose it's not called the Wayne Gretzky Bridge because Gretzky did not play for the Detroit Red Wings. The owners of the Ambassador Bridge are the billionaire Maroon family, headed by Manny Maroon. They have vehemently opposed the construction of the new Gordie Howe Bridge, vehemently in terms of court cases. To date, they have lost them all. The most recent one being just a couple of days ago on August the 10th. But let's not forget that it was the Maroon family that sold the Michigan Central Railway Station to the Ford Motor Company, the subject of the last 2 weeks' vlogs. The initial cost of the bridge, estimated to be anywhere from $5 billion to $10 billion, is to be paid for by the federal government of Canada. The state of Michigan will then reimburse their 50% share to the federal government of Canada from tolls collected over the years. Another look at the location of the new bridge in a neighborhood called DELRAY, and work has actually started on the Windsor side near Windsor Salt. Here I am just outside of Windsor Salt, a salt mine that's been around forever and that's been on our tables forever, Windsor Salt. Just across the street, well, you see all the construction that's being taken place for the Gordie Howe Bridge. So a lot is happening on the Canadian side, nothing on the U.S. And here's a view of me trying to explain the situation from the Detroit side. But the dialogue is totally washed out in the wind.
Let's shoot.
What am I shooting?
Hey.
What am I shooting?
Yourself in the river.
While I covered all the tunnels and bridges, I might as well mention that there's also a truck ferry that crosses the Detroit River just west of the Ambassador Bridge. Now, about that neighborhood of DELRAY in Detroit, it happens to be one of the poorest in Detroit, which is really saying something. It's going to be totally obliterated with the construction of the bridge, something reminiscent of what happened to Black Bottom when Interstate I-75 was put into downtown Detroit. Needless to say, there's a lot of opposition by the residents of DELRAY and by social activists. Warning, my previous vlogs on Detroit have been incredibly upbeat, but looming in the background are some of the neighborhoods, and they are incredibly devastated, DELRAY being among the worst. So be ready for this.